Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you this morning. And it is Friday, a beautiful Friday indeed. 72 degrees outside this morning and just beautiful. A little bit of a wind. And we must have had a major wind yesterday. Got home in the afternoon and we have some seating outside by the fire pit, and it was all blown over, and the neighbors' trash cans were all blown over. I don't remember there being a major wind yesterday, but it must have been something, because maybe it was just localized to my neighborhood, but it was very, very, very windy, or either that or a very angry javelina. I don't know. But it is good to be with you, and I hope you're getting ready for a great weekend. It should be an awesome weekend. It's going to be 100, maybe 97 today. I don't know what it's going to be high today in Vail. But then we should start seeing things cool off because we're getting to the end of September. And at the end of September, we always start to see things just cool off just a little bit. Birthdays, we have no birthdays today. Last night was the hardthingsconference.com. A great presentation on marriage. So if you missed that, you can always pick it up on the rebroadcast. Go to hardthingsconference.com and look for the rebroadcast, and you'll be able to see the actual presentation. It's pretty good. And let's see, what else? I think that's about it. I am probably going to be gone next Friday and have breakfast with my father down in Casa Grande. So you might want to put that in your calendar. And then probably also going to be gone the week of October 19th, 20th, 21, 22, 23. Thinking about going to see my granddaughter in Chicago. So that would be great. It's a part of the Vail School District fall break and part of the Creation School fall break. And so I'm sorry, not Chicago. No, we're going to Houston to see Jennifer's parents. We haven't seen them in a few months, so it's time to go visit them. So I think that week, 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, that week we're going to drive to Houston, make sure that we quarantine beforehand, spend a few days with them, and drive back. Normally, we do this trip annually and take Amtrak because we love hopping on Amtrak and just enjoying, reading a book, talking to other people, eating in the restaurant. But we can't do that because we're still in this COVID thing. So, and I don't really like driving to Houston. It's kind of a boring drive. I mean, it's okay to do. I'm not complaining or anything like that. It's just that it ends up being a long drive. Sometimes we'll do it in 2 days. Sometimes we'll do it in 1 day. If we've got the time, we'll do it in 2 days. But if it's trying to fit it in between two events, then we drive in 1 day and spend a few days with them and drive back. So so we're going to be gone that week, and I think that is about it. We are in the middle of Genesis chapter 41 in verse 33. And when we left yesterday, we were talking about how Joseph heard Pharaoh's dream, and it was 7 fat cows, then 7 skinny cows, and then 7 huge grains of wheat, and then 7 thin grains of wheat. And Pharaoh interpreted the dreams Joseph interpreted the dreams to Pharaoh, which was, you're going to have 7 years of great abundance. It's going to be awesome. But then you're going to have 7 years of famine. God has already ordained this, and the decision has already been made by God, and God's going to do it soon. And I mean, we always talk about harvest and plenty and famine, but this seems pretty, I don't know how Joseph would have been able to interpret this without the help of the Holy Spirit and God in his life. Pharaoh is now trusting that Joseph knows what he's talking about. So I think we'll pick up the story there. Maybe I'll read just the verse 32 prior to it once, and then we'll get into it. So verse 32, the reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. So God, this is it. This is my command that you're going to do it, or that I'm going to do it. And so we will go up to verse 33. This is Joseph speaking. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of the good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by famine. So it's interesting. He doesn't say to take a seventh of the food, because you'd think a seventh would be about right, because then at the end of, you'd have a full year's worth of food. But Joseph recommends a fifth. And that is probably because there's going to be abundance. People are going to have to really learn to live with a little bit less. So they're going to have to change their ways, but they'll have 7 years to do that. And then a fifth, they'll lose some during loss, right? You store food. It doesn't always stay. You're going to have some loss of food. So a fifth seems like a right amount. Actually, it sounds, if I knew what was happening, I'd say, yeah, this seems like a great idea to me. And you're going to collect all the good years, and the food should be held in reserve for the country. So not only is the food going to be held in reserve, but you've got to, the food is not only held in reserve, but you've got to create the storage houses to put the food. You've got to, I'm sure they have methods of storing the food, depending upon what the food is. It's grain and cows. We know how to make jerky that'll last a long time. So, they probably had techniques and everything to keep food preserved for a very, very long time. But you've got to, not only do you have to, eat the food that you're currently, for that year, but you've got to figure out a whole entire process, an industrial process, to create a whole team of people that are taking the food that is going to be stored in the 1/5 and put that in a place that's safe so that it can be available in the lean years. So this is actually quite a major undertaking. Was it Herbert Hoover? Was a guy like this, right? If President Herbert Hoover was one that he did what did he do? I think it was a European. He figured out how to get food over to Europe. Maybe during World War I think it was, maybe a food drop, or I'm probably missing all this, but I know it was Herbert Hoover that was able to, Herbert Hoover, the engineer, by the way, civil engineer, mechanical engineer, I don't know, who was able to do this incredible process that made him eventually become president, because people, trusted him because he was able to do these things. So Joseph is suggesting that they find a Herbert Hoover to manage this whole entire process. What needs to be done is pretty much clear because Joseph has outlined it. But what you need is a good manager, somebody who's got the ability to get things done, right? This is the 3 in the Enneagram, right? People who, they know what needs to be done, and they're just going to be, and they're going to do it. And they're very, very happy. Their love language is getting things done. And so that's what Joseph is proposing. So let's see what happens. Verse 37, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Wow. So Pharaoh recognizes that Joseph might be the guy to do it. Now, this is unusual because you don't usually find all the gifts, like the person who has the dream, the person who interprets the dream, the person that comes up with the plan, and the person who manages the plan. You don't normally find all that concentrated in one individual, because Joseph didn't have the dream, but you don't normally find all that talent in one individual. But Joseph is not your normal individual. He is humble. He is honest. He has integrity. He is wrongfully accused. Many people believe that Joseph is a pre-type of Jesus, right? That if you look at Joseph's life and you look at the life of Jesus, you can see a lot of parallels. And the way that Joseph is treated and the way that Jesus is treated, there's some parallels there. So some people see a parallel that Joseph is a type of Jesus in the Old Testament. Maybe, because be able to find one person with so much talent is very, 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 very challenging. But not impossible. Certainly are people like Herbert Hoover, right? But who's able to be a good manager and a good president. I mean, there are, every once in a while, God lifts up and raises up somebody with incredible talent. For the rest of us poor schmucks that only have talent in one area, we have to rely on other people who are talented in the other areas. All right, so Pharaoh says to Joseph, God made this all known to you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Did we read that? Yeah. Verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God made this known to you, there is no one discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So basically, what Pharaoh is saying is that you're my number two. You are the prime minister. The Queen of England is the queen, and you are now the prime minister. And you are to make sure that all this happens as the prime minister. You are Winston Churchill. And so Joseph graciously accepts this position, and let's see how that goes for him. Can he handle it? Verse 41, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, I thereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger, and he dressed him in his robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Now, just if you have Pharaoh's signet ring, this gives you pretty much the power of Pharaoh, and he's dressed in Pharaoh's clothes. It's a visual signal that Pharaoh has bestowed all of this authority on Joseph. And again, remember in the life of Jesus, where he says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Well, all the authority in Egypt has been given to Joseph. The only authority that has not been given to Joseph is that of Pharaoh himself. The only one that can overrule Joseph is Pharaoh. All the other people, all the other administrators, all the other officials, magicians, sorcerers, managers, mid-level managers, slaves, everybody in Egypt must follow the new prime minister Joseph. Verse 43, he had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. So not only does he get all the robe and the signet ring, but he also is in a chariot with Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all of Egypt. And Pharaoh gave Joseph the name of Zaphanath-Paneah, and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. So this is wise of Pharaoh. So he dresses him in all the Pharaoh stuff. He puts him on the chariot. They drive through town. Everybody sees that Joseph has been made number two. But it doesn't stop there. He also gives him a new name. This is apparently an Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah. Egyptologists have looked at this name. They really can't find out what it means. I guess Paneah might... Neah, the end of it, may mean life. The early Jewish people said that Zaphanath-Paneah meant the man who knows the mysteries of God, right? Or the one who knows the mysteries, because he was able to perceive Pharaoh's dreams and turn it into reality. Just not a whole lot known about this name. Particularly now that we have the hieroglyphs in Egypt, and we understand what they mean. They've gone back to some of the hieroglyphs, and they can see that Nia is a glyph that means life. But other than that, we really have no idea what this means. But he does give him a new name, and then he gives him the daughter of a priest to be his wife. So, I mean, really what Pharaoh is doing is assimilating Joseph. He may be Jewish from tradition and heritage from when he came in the land of Canaan, but now that he's in Egypt, he has to be made an Egyptian. And what better way to be made an Egyptian and to get the trust of the people than to give him a wife who is the priest, or give him a wife who is the daughter of one of the priests of Egypt. And Joseph doesn't seem to be concerned about the fact that he's going to marry an Egyptian woman, which his father and grandfather and great-grandfather would have been horrified by, except that now that he's in a position of power, his whole family's left him. He is wise then to take on a wife in Egypt, because that just gives him more authority and power. I remember one of the books that I read years ago. Oh man, long time ago when it came out. Shogun, James Clavell. Who wrote Shogun? It's a big, thick book. I mean, it's about that thick, and it's about this story of a guy who gets shipwrecked, I think, in Japan. And he ends up becoming Japanese and learning the Japanese way. And the emperor of Japan is toying with him and telling him that he's going to build a boat so that he can go back to England. And, he's only going to be in Japan temporarily. He's a captain of a ship. But over time, he takes on a Japanese wife and has Japanese children and learns the Japanese customs. And pretty soon he becomes an effective person for the emperor, because he brings in to the kingdom of Japan technologies and new things of doing things like the way the British do, who at that time were much more advanced in some areas than Japan were. But everybody was cautious and pensive about having him, do things in Japan. And so, what was his name? Anjin-san was what they called him. Anjin-san. I can't remember but that's what he is in the book. And he learns how to live in Japan. It becomes quite successful, if I remember correctly, or maybe he dies. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. It's a thick book. They made it into a mini-series, which, of course, the movies are never as good as the book. We have in the Hook household the law that says you can't see the movie until you've read the book, because the book is always better than the movie. Rarely, if ever, is the movie as good as the book. So you have to experience it firsthand by reading the book. That's just our rule. And Shogun was definitely better as a book, but it was a pretty good miniseries. It was a miniseries. I think it was like a 6-part miniseries or something like that. Anyway, really profound book, really interesting book. I enjoyed it wholeheartedly. Who was it that wrote Shogun? Anyway, so reminds me that now Joseph is there. He's like Anjin-san, and he's been taken over all of Egypt, given all this power. And then he takes on this daughter, so he becomes very Egyptized to make him successful. And we'll find out, does he remain successful? Let's find out. Let's keep reading. Verse 46. Joseph was only 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food growth in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. So God truly is giving him an amazing abundance of grain. And all Joseph has to do is go around and collect the grain. The people aren't too concerned about this because they've got plenty of grain. As a matter of fact, they got so much grain, he stops. Joseph as a 3 probably, as an administrator, a high-level administrator, manager, it's got, I'm going to make sure I know exactly how much grain so I can ship grain, but there's so much grain, all he has to do is just go around and store it. And that's what he does. He stores up a huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, and he said, "It is because God has made me forget all of my trouble and all of my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, and he said, "It is because God made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." So he has 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And it's interesting that if you look at a land of Canaan, a map of all the sons of Jacob, because when they end up going back into Canaan and taking over the land, they divided up by tribes of Jacob, tribes of Israel. But you'll see on that map, you typically see Manasseh and Ephraim. And you're like, how are they the sons? They're the sons of Joseph. Joseph names his firstborn Manasseh because God made me forget all my troubles of my father's household. So it must be forgetting trouble. And then the second name is named Ephraim because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Probably, if I go back to the Jewish Targums, there's probably a lot about the names and how this all means historically. Maybe I'll do that. But 2 sons, and God appears to be blessing Joseph absolutely amazingly. So we'll read to the end here. Verse 53. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. And when all of Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food, and then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. So not only does Joseph store the grain, not only does he make Pharaoh look good, not only does he put this whole entire plan into place by going from prisoner to Pharaoh's prime minister, prisoner to prime minister. He also makes money for Pharaoh. Not that Pharaoh needs money. I mean, he's got all the money in the world, right? Well, not all the money in the world, but he's pretty well respected. In the Egyptian dynasty, we love the mummies and all this from the Egyptians, but the Egyptians were pretty amazing people. They had an incredible system of agriculture. I mean, the Nile Delta is extremely fertile. The Nile River is an incredible river for commerce. Egypt is in an area that is well suited for somebody of intelligence to take it over as a land and create a dynasty. And the pharaohs did that. The pharaohs, just basically the kings, they created an incredible dynasty in Egypt. And it's no surprise that one of the greatest libraries ever was in Egypt. I mean, Egypt has always been an amazing place. My daughter went to Egypt once. Why did she go? Would she go with the band? I think she either went with the Concordia Wind Symphony or she went by herself. I can't remember. Maybe I'll have to ask her. But she went to Egypt. And she was not impressed with Egypt. Today, they're mean people. They were mean to her because she's a female, and they were very, I don't know if mean is the right word, very cautious about Americans going over to Egypt. My dad's been to Egypt. He's seen the pyramids and all that sort of thing. I don't know if I have a desire to go to Egypt. My place that I want to go, just so you all know, I want to go to Constantinople. I want to go to Istanbul. That, of all the places, I've been to a lot of Europe, but that's one place that just really, I'd like to go in the footsteps of Paul. I'd like to go to Constantinople. I'd like to go to Istanbul. I don't know if I want to go to Israel. It seems like a pretty dangerous place to go. Although, apparently there's new peace in Israel. I have no idea. We'll have to see how life turns out. It's something I don't have to worry about right now. But one day before I die, I would like the two things I want to do is hike the Arizona Trail and go to Istanbul. Those are the two things I want to do. Anyway, yeah. So, but not only that, but he makes money for Pharaoh. Some people just have all the blessings from God. He makes money. Oh my goodness. And probably a lot of money, because people are willing, probably when you're starving, you're willing to pay almost anything for food, right? And why was there famine? I mean, there's really only one reason why there's famine in the land. And we probably don't see it as much because we live in an agrarian society. We know how to grow food. But the famine in the land definitely is because of drought. The 7 years of rain caused all this food to just grow in abundance. They were able to open up new lands and grow new crops and all that sort of thing. And as you have more food and high quality food, then you end up having more children. And as you have more, because the land can support more people, it can support more cows. And so you end up, I mean, you can really see how this almost all, grows. But because Joseph goes and takes a fifth of everything, it doesn't grow as much. And Joseph puts it all together in storage bins. But everybody becomes wealthy during the 7 years. And you become wealthy by a whole bunch of different years. So when you get to the 7 years of famine, you have a little bit of wealth in each family to buy the grain from Pharaoh's. And he doesn't give the grain away, which I find fascinating. I don't know. In a land, we're living in a time of famine right now with the pandemic. And I think it's curious that one of the solutions to the pandemic is just to give things away, as opposed to making it easier for people to get what they need. But I don't know if it's wise to just give things away. I really don't know. I mean, I understand why the current administration is doing that, and previous administrations have done things like this. Our whole welfare social state is on giving things away. But I just don't know if giving things away is a wise thing to do. There's a book that was written in the first century called the Didache, which is the teaching of the disciples, and it was how the early church lived and how they conducted themselves with the way of life, the way of death. And then there's some stuff on baptism, there's stuff on communion, there's stuff on the small community. And one of the things that the early church did was that they gave away food, possessions, and everything to people in need. But there's a precaution in there that says that you should let the alms sweat in your hands before you give it away. And what I believe that means is that you should not give alms to somebody unless you are absolutely convinced by God that this is going to be better for them than having them earn it on their own. Because there's so many different ways. Once a program becomes huge and part of a government system, and people are no longer individuals that need to be loved and cared for individually, but they become numbers on a page, it is so easy for individuals then to game the system. And allowing people to game the system harms them more than anything else. And of course, nobody can know if somebody's gaming the system unless you are really deeply invested in a person's life. And so in the Didache, it says, do not just give stuff away. You have to it almost forces you as a community of believers, the church, to really be invested in people's lives to find out, is this truly a need, or are they just gaming the system? And I mean, that is a warning from the early church, from the Didache, because, and Rockefeller found this out. Rockefeller, who became, the richest man in the 1900s, early 1900s, he couldn't give the money away. I read a book on Rockefeller, and he became so wealthy. Every time he tried to give money away, it destroyed the people he gave the money to. And the same thing is true with giving alms. If you give alms to people and they don't really need it, they can work, but they don't. They could make it on their own, but they don't because they just want to receive gifts. We see this in African countries all the time. There have been missionaries that have gone over to African countries, and they give so much of the abundance of wealth from the United States that these African countries don't have to do anything. Not all of them, but in some areas, it actually will destroy a tribe or a people or whatever. I mean, you have to be very, very careful. There was a book I read. I'll just finish with this story. There's a book I read called Toxic Charity. And it's about a couple that goes to a downtown and they buy a house and they live in downtown, and they want to bless the downtown by gifts from the church. And so they're actually doing it right. I mean, instead of living in the suburb and driving into downtown and doing the things, they become part of downtown. They marry the priestess of On, right? They become acclimated and part of the downtown. And of course, they're still connected with the church in the suburb. And the church in the suburb wants to, it's becoming Christmas time. This is one of the stories in the book. It's Christmas time. And the church in the suburb wants to shower downtown people with gifts because they know that they can't afford Christmas gifts. And so all the gifts are collected and everything. And it's this guy who puts it on, and he goes to a house to give all these gifts. And when he walks into the house to give the gifts, the father of the house quietly goes upstairs and disappears. And he finds out later that the reason why the father disappeared was because he was embarrassed. He was shamed because he thought he was being a good father. He was there for his kids. He was giving them clothing. He was giving food on the table. He was doing everything that he thought was necessary. The one thing he couldn't give his children, or didn't even think was necessary to give his children, was new expensive toys from the from the store. And so the whole point of the book is you can't just give charity, because if you give it incorrectly, it becomes toxic. And Pharaoh seems to know this lesson. He doesn't just give the food away. He makes the people pay for it. And so the people still have their honor. The people still have their integrity. But there's food available for them to purchase. I think that's so incredibly wise of Pharaoh. I don't know if that was a Pharaoh thing or a Joseph thing, but it was incredibly wise. Because who was it that said the most important way that you can build self-confidence and self-worth in any individual is give them a job? Because the moment that you pay somebody for doing a job, they get self-worth, they get that feeling that they can be contributive to the world and to society. I mean, the best thing for a person to feel like they're a contributing member of society is just give them a job. Doesn't matter what the job is. Just give them a job. And as soon as they start to get money for the job that they're doing, that builds their self-esteem in ways that counseling can't do. It's the most powerful thing that we can do to people is just give them a job. So anyway, I think and then they can take that job and they can go and get grain and live, right? I think we'll leave it there. And thanks for joining me today. We have no birthdays over the weekend. One birthday today. No birthdays today, none over the weekend, but we have one coming up on Monday. I believe there's another session over the weekend on the conference, so check that out. And we will get together Monday, but it'll only be a short week next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I won't be here on Friday. So let's close in prayer. Dear God, thank you for this example of Joseph and how he was so connected to you that he was able to save Egypt. Help us, Lord, to be so connected to you that we can be your hands and feet in the world. Bless us through this pandemic. Until we meet again, keep us in your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will be here next week, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye.